everyone, I'm Sophie and I wanted to make this quick video to talk about how to work from photographs when you're painting a portrait. Whether you're painting in oils or acrylic, watercolour, pastel, it doesn't really matter. Many of us work from photographs. And I just wanted to quickly go over all the ups and downs and the pitfalls you could fall into when you work from photographs. I paint a lot of portraits and I often work from photographs, but there are a few things you need to keep an eye on when you do so. Now, the first few things are pretty obvious. First of all, if you are working on a portrait that you want to sell or exhibit or anything like that, you must work from your own photographs. If you're just doing it for practice, then obviously you can use photographs from the internet or from other people, but you must remember that you do not own the copyright to that. It is not your artwork, really, if you work with a photograph that was made by somebody else. After all, that other person, the photographer, has already made lots of choices for the crop, the lighting, the clothing, the choice of model, etc. So it's not really totally your photo. So depending on what you want to do with your painting, choose your photographs wisely. Now also work with good photograph. Make your life easier and choose sharp photograph. Use large digital files and photographs where you can zoom in and you can actually see some detail. Don't use tiny little snapshots that do not blow up on the computer, where you can't see any details. Now, the next thing I would say is to keep your photograph on your computer screen if you can. Most modern computer screens can show so many more colours and so much more depth than a printed image can do. So do not print the photo out, but work from your computer screen if at all possible. On the computer screen, you can play around with the contrast and the shadows and the lights, etc. while you are working on your painting. Well, if you've got a printed image next to your easel, then that's all you've got. The picture will be much flatter and much duller, and it's really, really up to you then to get a bit of life into it. So if you work from a good computer monitor, it will make life so much easier, I promise. Now, the next thing is similar to that. Use a good photo editing program if possible. In a photo editing program, you can enhance your photos endlessly and be creative from the start. Really, to create a good work of art, you can start the creative process inside a photo editing program already. Because after all, that is where you choose your crop. That is where you can play around what to include and what not to include. You can have a look at how bright or how dark you want things. You can use a photo editing program to have a look what's inside those really dark shadows and brighten them up a bit. Photographs often tend to darken the shadows and lighten the highlights, and you end up with very lively but high contrast photographs. Now, when you're painting a portrait, you do not want that all the time. You might want a much more realistic and a much calmer image where the contrast is much lower. So you need to be able to see what's inside those bright white highlights, and you need to be able to see what's inside those dark shadows. So in a computer editing program, you can bring all those details forward. So it's really useful to use a program like Photoshop Elements or something like that. Now, if you're working from your own photos, it's always useful to make lots of photos. So if you are painting your friend, for example, and you just want a forward-facing headshot, it's really useful to also take some photos from the side when he or she is smiling or laughing or frowning. Now, you might not be working literally from those photographs, but it's really useful to see what happens to a face when it's moving or when it's seen from another angle. Now, when you do choose a photo to work from, so for example, let's assume that we're working with this photo, which I picked off the internet from a copyright-free site. So there's lots of things we can still do here. You can literally copy the photo, but why would you? You can just as well hang the photo on the wall if you like it so much. And you must try to create a work of art that is yours and yours alone. So this is just your reference photo. You're going to try and make a realistic representation of this girl, but it still needs to be your painting and it has to have your take on things. So that doesn't mean you need to change her nose or change her eyebrows or anything like that, but it's the way you use your brush or you use your pastel stick or your pencil that will infuse the picture with your own interpretation of a photo. So there's lots of choices you can make to start with. For example, we can start with the crop and the composition of your painting. Are you going to go for a landscape or a portrait format? Are you going to cut the top off like it is in this photo? How far down are you going to go? Do you want the coat and the zip in it or not? Do you want to put her shoulders in it or not? So you can already make loads of choices at the beginning of your painting process. Now the same is with the background. In this photograph, the wall on the left is blurred out, but maybe you want that wall in and give it a bit of texture, a bit of urban style. So have a think about these. So when you take your own photos, make sure your photos are sharp all over. Don't play around with blurry backgrounds because you might choose later on to put a background in. It's always useful to have everything clear and everything in focus so you can change your mind later about what to put in and what not to put in. You can do the same with the contrast, for example. There are some very dark areas in this photograph. Do you want to brighten that up, or do you want to make it even darker maybe and make it a more dramatic picture? But also while you are painting, you can choose how to deal with the edges, for example. What are you going to do with the area between the coat and the background? What are you going to do with the hair that touches the skin? Are you going to make these really clear and contrasty things, or are you going to make it quite fuzzy and quite blurry to create a different mood? Are you going to paint the hat into full detail and try and make it super woolly? Or is it much more a background thing and not that relevant? There are a million choices you can make when you've got a photo in front of you and while you're working on a painting, and all of these choices will help to make and create a painting that is uniquely yours. So instead of just copying a photo, which of course can be brilliant practice as well, so there's nothing wrong with that, but if you are after creating something that is a little bit more yours, then have a think about all these choices that you can make in order to make this your painting. And when you take your own photographs, make sure you give yourself all the room in the world to make these choices. So working from photographs can be just as creative as working from life. In fact, sometimes it can even be more creative because you can change things so much. You can work in an editing program and really change the whole look of the picture, or you can take it as it is and play around with all the options that I've described. I hope this has helped a little bit in working from photographs when you're painting a portrait, and I hope that you will dive in your next portrait with more ideas. So good luck and happy painting.